RoboSync is a logic and timing based puzzle game that sees you indirectly controlling various different robots to manipulate their paths so that they all cross red pressure plates together at exactly the same time. When all the red pressure plates are lit, the exit door opens and you in your little robot form can scamper through to the exit and bounce on to the next level. It's a really simple concept, but it's really beautifully executed, and whilst RoboSync is a short and sweet puzzle game that can take anywhere from perhaps 1 to 3 hours depending on how quick or slow you go, it's one of those games that I felt quite satisfied playing, even if I was probably clearing it towards the shorter side of that runtime scale. In RoboSync, you'll be playing as a robot that stays purely at the bottom rung of every level or bottom corridor, and each level is like a building that's been cut in half so that you can see through it. On the bottom corridor, there'll be lots of different switches that have got numbers next to them, and these will correspond to different gates or elevators that are dotted around the level. And the idea is that you're moving backwards and forth, triggering all of the different switches and gates and elevators at the precise right time to synchronize up the robots who are on the other floors in the game, so that they can then all arrive at those red pressure points at exactly the same time. At the very beginning of the game, this becomes quite easy because it will be around trying to hold back robots by lowering gates and keeping them in the right place, and then letting them go so that they walk alongside or in exact parallel mirror versions to what's going on the floor above or below them, so that they then arrive on those red pressure points at the same time. But quickly in RoboSync, it starts to do things like there'll always have to be 1 or 2 panels behind, or it might be that the gates aren't necessarily in the right order, so then you need to kind of run back and forth and trigger them by pressing them at exact times. Some of them will only raise a gate when you stand on top of the button, so you have to kind of take that into consideration. And elevators work the same way later on in the game, where you've got a switch that you can stand on and the elevator will rise, and when you let go the elevator falls, or you can trigger it with a button switch. It just depends on the level and what you've got going on. But as more and more robots come into play and there's more floors for you to have to take into consideration, the more difficult the game becomes, because floors become not all the same length, and then that means that things start to become out of sync, or you might have to trigger things, say, a couple of seconds ahead of time so that it then marries up, because not all of the levels or floors in a level are the exact same size. You really have to plan things out in advance and hope you've got it right. And if you get it perfect, you get this little tick sync that appears on top of a robot to show that these 2 robots are now in sync, or 3 or 4 as you're going through the game itself. So it gives you lots of really good visual feedback that everything's perfectly aligned as you try and get the 3 stars for completing it within the minimum time frame. One of the clever things about the level design and the game design of RoboSync, though, is the background walls, and I found this insanely helpful. At the beginning of the game, it gives you numerical panels at the back, and this helps you to understand, particularly when you've got robots kind of going one way and the next one underneath is going in the opposite direction. It helps you understand at what point you should trigger gates to open and close, because you can count in from the sides, and sometimes the background panes will be in like yellow, so it will be like you should trigger it here, so that they all kind of arrive together. So it gives you lots of nice spoonful hints from the environmental clues around you, and slowly over time those clues start to fade away as you get to grips with the game itself. And I thought that was an ingenious way of easing someone in to the way how RoboSync works as a game, and from a logic perspective, because it helped me to then start going, okay, I need to trigger this 1 panel after the next robot, and so on and so forth, so that you can then go, right, okay, I feel like I've got it. And then you try and execute it perfectly where you can, and score maximum points if you do. If I was to be critical about RoboSync, I would say that it's quite succinct in its scope, and it does a lot with its core mechanics. But if I was to see like RoboSync 2, The Revenge, to come out, I think where I'd want to expand this is to include a couple of other mechanics to help you stop and hold back robots, or include different types of robots, almost like a Plants vs Zombies lane tower defense game. This has quite a lot of DNA in common with that, even though it's a logic and timing based puzzler. Bringing along different robots that do different things and having to take into account for that, I think would be where I would push a sequel if this was to be successful enough to warrant one. But as it is, I very much enjoyed RoboSync. Short, sharp, succinct, but gave me a lot of satisfaction. Take care. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/higherplane-network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.